All right, back with another session of 10NL, and this one I think is a little bit more eventful than some I've had recently. This is one I played last Sunday, so that would be what, March 17th, and this includes uh, some bad beats, a dust off by me, a couple of bluffs here and there that I'll have to see whether I think they're any good. I haven't watched it back since. And we start off here with jacks. I think we start off here with a, we'll see, we'll see. I know this hand, slight spoiler, this hand doesn't go all that well. So we call with jacks against the 3-bet from the small blind. We get a really crummy flop. I think for a quarter pot here, particularly when we've got the jack of hearts, we do need to call, although it's, it's already getting pretty ugly. And we have a pretty straightforward check back here. No reason to bet, no reason to turn the hand into a bluff. Can't possibly value bet. And now he bets a quarter pot. We are getting 4-1. How often are we good here? We need to be good 1 in 5. I'm not sure that we are. I think this is just a sort of sad, crying call. I'm hoping that he occasionally turns up with like tens or ace five, ace four, or just some ridiculous bluff. But yeah, it's so depressing to fold to a very small bet on the river. But maybe that was a fold. So we're off to a poor start. And the session is very young, and we get kings here. And just let's just watch this hand. Now, when a guy 4-bets small, you say to yourself, "Look, the guy has aces. He has aces. Not much you can do about it. Just get the chips in. Wait for it." Ah, Jack Deuce. It's just crazy, really. When I play 10, I'm 5NL, I run great. I'll freely admit it. My graph says I run great. I feel like I hold up the vast majority of the time, even perhaps more than I really ought to. Play 10NL, immediately that garbage. I mean, what do you even say about that? It's obviously, nothing you can do about it, and you want players to be doing stupid stuff like that. But yeah, it is frustrating when you lose to a nonsense hand. It's almost like you'd rather a guy turned over ace queen suited. Like you feel I might be able to beat ace queen suited, but he turns over jack deuce. I've no shot. Aces here, doesn't look like we're getting any action. Or are we? Or are we? I think we go for the 4-bet here. Pretty standard stuff. Sizing seems fine and a quick fold, so the bloke was obviously bluffing. Now, what this hand on the left, now I mentioned before I was going to have a dust off. Look at this. Now, the guy limps the button, and I raise the 4. So far, this is fine. He then does this. Now, what is this? Because obviously this is a ridiculous play. Limping the button and then min what, whatever this would be, 3-betting or 4-betting. I raise, and he then does this. I think at this point now, I go all in here. I'd be interested to hear what other people think this looks like. I think this is just a spew. Up until that point when I put 21 in, I think that was probably okay. But I think the remaining 80, I could have saved. Because when the guy does that little min click back, realistically, what do I think it is? I think what was going through my mind there was, one, it was bizarre play, but it was only about 2 minutes or so after the Jack 2 hand. And I just had it in my mind that people who were doing nonsense stuff like that probably had garbage. So, yeah, button against big blind. If he had played his hand normally, just raised, I'd 3-bet, he'd 4-bet, I would have shoved it, then I think it's fine. But it's like he was giving me all the clues in the world that he had a better hand than ace king, or he had aces specifically, and I just didn't listen. So I'm not sure about that spot. Maybe that was just a completely unnecessary loss of chips. So session is only about 4 or 5 minutes old and off to an absolutely hopeless start, but entertaining, entertaining. And fortunately, we don't get too frustrated there with the ace jack. This is the point where it's a test of, you know, I say mental game, but just keeping your composure. Because when you get off a really crummy start in a session, you're sort of 4 or 5 minutes in, you're already down two buy-ins. To me, I used to have to fight the urge to go, oh my God, I've got to win that money back because I'm actually worse off than I was if I just hadn't bothered playing. It's a silly mindset, but it can lead to plays that are trying to make it force things to happen. And that's always a disaster when you do that. So I try to continue to play. I'll not say good poker because I think I manage that very infrequently, but just the best poker that I can play, which is often not going to be great. But yeah, so we raised that with the fire. He's got a pretty woeful board, and yeah, it's almost questionable whether fives are an open from under the gun. I think on a board that connected, I don't particularly want to bet. Big blind's going to have a hard time missing that entirely. Yeah, certainly a bet on the left. Looks like I settle on half pot, which I usually do. Immediately get raised, which I usually do if there's two of the same suit out there. If it was monotone, I'd probably just go for a third. And I think the ace three here is just going to have to be a fold without a heart. So as you can see, off to a very very shaky start. Sixes when he checks behind. I think most players when they check behind they're not checking behind a hand better than sixes. It needs protection, so just go ahead and bet. And this is going to win the vast majority of the time. Yeah, I've been playing a mix of 5NL till now, mostly 5NL actually, because I haven't. I get home from work, I don't always, get a bit of time to play. Sometimes a little tired, so I'm playing 10NL sometimes at the weekends when I get a chance, and I will be playing quite a bit in the next week or so. Some time off. So we've had the session started poorly. Now had a bit of a few minutes of lull. Now get kings and get no action with them. So you either lose to the Jack Dewey or you get no action. Those are the only two options, as we all know. Ace eight's probably a defend against a button open. Don't love it. Probably a hand like you could go any one of the three. Fold, call, or raise are all possible. I think fold might actually be best with just a weak offsuit ace. And it looks like I decide blind on blind to go with a big bet here. So I quite like that play. I do think that when you have an ace and a king out there, it's just your opponent's just going to have such a hard time continuing against multiple barrels. So starting big and then betting big on the turn is going to be a very successful strategy with just about any two cards, I think. Looks like I decide maybe I was looking at that guy's stats there to see whether I was going to go for a four bet bluff, but I decide against it. Perhaps maybe a little gun shy at times when you go down a couple of buy-ins. I said before, it's trying to resist that temptation to force it and Maybe a 4-bet bluff when your confidence is a bit low isn't the best idea. Easy 3-bet here. I promise this session does pick up. There are some entertaining spots. Maybe there was a bit of a spell here where not too much was going on. There's definitely some hands later. Ace-8 off, I think closing the action, getting 5-1. It's a call. Ugly board for ace. Well, I say ugly board. It's not terrible. We're definitely going to see bets and going to pick up plenty of folds, but not on this occasion. This guy's also going to have. He is going to have some of this. We decide to check. I think now on the river, if you get checked to, I would like to see a bet. First of all, we can get stuff like all pocket bet, like sevens and eights to fold. If he has stuff like King Jack, Ace Jack, which might float, that they can probably fold. We're gonna go big, and I think with the King of Hearts, this is probably a good idea. He folds, yeah. We could have easily played pocket queens, pocket jacks like that. We could have backdoored a flush. He's going to have a hard time calling even with a hand like King Queen. He may not love it. So yeah, I think that was a good play. Maybe I say that because it happened to work, but I think it's just lots of hands. He's going to be in a spot there where he's not going to want to call, particularly an overbet. And I think we do have quite a few hands there we would want to overbet. So I think that's a good play. But I may be completely wrong. Couple of folds. So the session kind of, this is kind of how you expect a lot of sessions to go. Just not a huge amount going on. It's just when you quickly lose 2 blinds at the start and then this happens, it's that little frustrating. Obviously the kings couldn't do anything about ace king. So a bit of a spew off. Ace 3 of hearts here. I like this 3-bet. Yeah, I think that's we need to have some hands with a 3-bet from the big blind that aren't that strong, and a suited ace like that I think is a good candidate. Okay, king queen. Easy open. Really not an ideal board. We do a 2-O's backdoor diamonds, backdoor straight draw, but basically this is a hand we want to just be checking and folding. A lot of sets out there when 2 players just call you. Pretty good card for us. And a very good card for us. We have a very straightforward bet here, just half pot, Fold to a raise. Don't think you're ever going to get bluffed in the spot. Ace jack off. I think this is just a fold. It's a really poor hand to be calling three bets with. And if the guy had loose three bet stats, could consider a four bet as a bluff. I swear there was more action in this. Maybe it's sort of bookended. Maybe there's a lot of action at the start and some action towards the end. But there definitely are some hands coming up. Could go either way with this queen jack. Don't hate a check for a bit of deception slash pot control. And we just want to call. Don't ever want to raise here. It's not strong enough to raise for value. Certainly don't want to be raising it as a bluff. I think we could go for a small value bet here. Well, I think he's going to have stuff like ace five, ace three that might call. That's a little weak. As it happens, he wouldn't have called, but I think that's probably a small bet there would be the right play. Not only can you get value from stuff, but potentially, if someone does raise, you might fold, but you might not. You might just think a small bet you've induced someone to go nuts with some garbage. So I think there is a certainly argument there for small bets. Raising with the snowmen and getting a pretty good board for the snowmen. I think a two-thirds pot bet is appropriate. A lot of bad turn cards. Happy to take it here. And decide to go with a call with the threes. It's a okay play, I guess, from the small blind. I probably would prefer just three bet or folding with a hand like threes. I think I just prefer fold. It's always possible if a guy has particularly weird stats that I think that my implied odds are just way better. So I call, but I think in general that's just better to play as a fold. Decide to go for a check with the nines. Yeah, I don't mind that. You don't want to bet necessarily get raised, so you can range bet this kind of board, but I think checking and calling is also fine. Now I think a small bet on the river is the right play. When he checks back, I don't think he's going to check back too many queens. I think he is going to have lots of like ace five suited, pocket sixes, pocket sevens, and yeah, I suspect I think I remember that hand. I wonder if I write in the chat. I think he may have had pocket sixes. I'm not sure. So as you can see, we're not exactly smashing these boards. Go for a C bet with the king queen, get called. And this is all about whether you want to fire to try and get the guy to fold a pocket pair, sevens sort of through nines, the type of stuff people are going to show up with a lot, or whether you just think people have a lot of ace X. I think when people call pre-flop, they often have a lot of pocket pairs, but so ace high boards are not as as bad as you think they are when you have a hand like King Queen there, but we decide, for whatever reason, to go with the check, and maybe we were right. Ace King off here. I don't generally like to get 100 big blinds in when it's these positions. When you raise under the gun and a guy three bets you from there, he isn't doing it light that often, so I think stacking off with Ace King is a bit loose. This is from the same man who earlier pissed in 100 big blinds against some numpty who had aces. And how we fold, it's a bit weak, isn't it? It's a bit weak. I guess without a spade, though, out of position, it gets very awkward. So at the moment, a rather sad session, it has to be said. A pitiful beginning, followed by dribbling. That's how I do quite a few things in life, Essie. We go with three bet with the tens. Sorry, tens, ace ten. I can't even call out the bloody cards. All right. Yeah, I guess you can defend with the ace six against the min open, but these hands are just so difficult to play because they just don't flop anything. And now we'll check and we'll call, and we'll probably end up folding the turn. Queen 10 on this board, I think it's just a C bet. Nice. That's why a hand like ace six off, even against a min raise, almost works better as a fold. It just doesn't play well post. Cowboys again. Cowboys three or four times now, I think. Yep. Another marvelous flop for them. The old ace magnets. We do at least win the pot. Right, now there must be a few hands here to finish, so I can remember a couple of pretty decent sized pots. They must have been later in the session than I remember them. Easy open here with Jack 9 of spades. We go for a bet, I presume, half pot with the open ender, and the sevens we decide to check back. I would think we go for a bet here on the right. He's going to have plenty of like 10x. Even weak aces at this point are going to struggle against a sizable bet. That is such a god-awful card. Clubs get there. Any ace X is now not going to fold. I think we're probably just going to have to give up. Yes, we can get to ace five. I just don't think even ace five folds. If a guy's called on that turn with ace five, and also the thing is, when people call overbets on the turn, they generally aren't going to fold rivers. That's my experience, particularly when the obvious hands to call there would be an ace if that now makes trips. Even though ace five on the river, if I go all in, doesn't really beat much. If anything, he probably would still call. Okay, so this hand on the left here, this is one I do remember. So let's see what happens. Open with the tens. Get a call from the small blind. Get three bet squeeze from the big. I think this is just a call, particularly since the guy behind us is almost certainly going to call as well. It'd be very unlikely for him to jam. So given that we've got position, I think that this is a hand we want to call with. Now, I don't know whether here when he checks, I don't know whether this would be work best as a small bet. I do decide to check 'cause I really don't want to get check raised, and I'm going to be betting if checked to here. Now, this guy leads out. He had pretty spewy stats. Now, we unblock spades. He could easily have like just 9-8 or just like any random garbage. So I decide to call. River, Queen 10 gets there, but we've got two tens. Is he going to do this with a jack? Is he going to have lots of bluffs here? This was a call I largely made based on the guy having very spewy stats. He does have pocket fives. Whether or not that's a great play or not, I don't know. It worked out, and it is why having a HUD can be very helpful. I felt he just had so many bluffs there, given that he would be calling so wide pre. If he had a jack, he felt like the kind of guy that might even just donk the flop. So I decided to, certainly without a spade in my hand, to make the call. And he did turn up with one of those sort of weird hands that people should never really have, just a sort of weird merge with fives. So worked out. Whether that was a good play or not, who knows? I certainly wouldn't do that against a tighter opponent. So that was an opponent specific call. So session winding down, about 3 minutes left or so. There's time for one more interesting hand, I can assure you. Guy checks back the flop on the right. I think we can, with the open end now, we can stab pretty liberally. He's going to have so much just trash that doesn't want to call. And if we get called here, we can still fire a lot of rivers. Pocket four is definitely going to call. Oh no, sorry, I thought that said six. It says eight. Okay, then I think that's going to have to be a fold. Nice flop for the ace nine. Go a little bit larger. We need a bit of protection with a weakish top pair. And by weakish, I mean that the nine is a low card. Phenomenal turn card, and I'd like to see a large bet here. Whether we'd like to bet large with a whole range, I don't know, but trips with top kicker. Sometimes just play your hand and get a good run out. The hearts don't get there. Three bet the ace queen. Okay, so two hands going on at once. So here I want to go with a large bet. I think something like 2/3, 3/4 pot. Yep, that's fine. We've got very unlikely we're beaten. If he has a nine, he snaps us off. And I think he had queen five of hearts, so he rivered the queen. So I'd go for a check back here with the ace queen. And this is sort of an interesting hand. I'm going to call here. I decided to check back the flop because when he cold calls from the small blind, this board actually is deceptively poor, I think, for ace queen. He's got pocket jacks, he's got pocket tens, maybe should even have like ace jack, ace ten suited. He bets small here. And I decide just to go all in. I think that when he bets small here, people are not going to do this very often when they have a very strong hand. They're not going to balance. So they're going to have two pair. We may have had the best hand. So I may have ended up bluffing with the best hand. But in any chance, if he did have ace jack, ace 10, ace king, if we got him to fold that, great. Because if you think about it, he calls pre-flop. What hands do that? People usually call with hands that are too strong in their mind to fold, but not strong enough to raise. And that there would have had pocket, pocket tens, maybe ace jack, ace ten. So all those sort of hands by the river would have had a really tough time calling. Anyway, I decided to go for a blast on the river there, and because I think ace queen, if I just called, it would have been weak, and yeah, we'd have often lost to two pairs. So to put him under a lot of pressure there felt like it made sense. Anyway, a slightly more eventful session, not quite as eventful as perhaps I remembered. Hope you enjoyed it. Run at 10 and L isn't going particularly well, down $5.08 in that session. But thank you very much for watching. Take care. Bye bye.